Welcome in the name of Christ. It's good to see each of you and know that you're with us even in this way. And we are grateful for your commitment to the congregations and ministries of the Synod. I'm Kevin Strickland and I serve as your bishop. I want to start with some introductions as we begin, and then Pastor Patty Axel, who is the assistant to the bishop and director of evangelical mission, will join us with some devotions.
55 so far.
But to start with some introductions, I'll call you staff by name. If you would just quickly say your name and what you do. So Pastor Jill Henning.
I'm Pastor Jill Henning. I'm the assistant to the bishop for leadership and administration.
Thank you. Pastor Karen Boda.
I'm Pastor Karen Boda, and I'm assistant to the bishop for Congregational Life.
Thank you. Pastor Michael Jeanette.
I'm Pastor Michael Jeanette. I serve as assistant to the bishop for formation and communication, which includes youth, young adult, campus ministry, communications, and more.
Thank you. My mouth is tongue-tied. Miss Melissa Fuller-Sims.
Hello, I'm Melissa Fuller-Sims, assistant to the bishop and director for evangelical mission, also coordinator for candidacy.
Thank you. Pastor Patty Axel. You're on mute, Patty.
Yep, there we are. Okay. Patty Axel, what? Did somebody just unmute me? Can you hear me? Okay. Patty Axel, assistant to the bishop, the other director of evangelical mission.
Thank you.
Good to see y'all.
Thank you. Miss Holly Learsh.
Holly Learsh, and I'm the office manager, and I work with the Synod finances.
Thank you so much, Holly. Pastor Matt Steinhauer.
Pastor Matt Steinhauer, assistant to the bishop, director of advocacy.
Thank you. Pastor Justin Eller.
I'm Pastor Justin Eller, the assistant to the bishop for Latinx ministry initiatives.
Thank you. And I think I got all the staff, didn't I? If I didn't, I apologize. Someone called me out on that. If I did.
Holly's here.
I said Holly. Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry.
And we also welcome anyone who's on our Synod Council with us tonight as well. So grateful for all of you. I want to go ahead and start because we have a lot to go through, and big thanks to our COVID-19 team who've been meeting for almost this entire time we've been in this pandemic, and I'm grateful for each of them, and you'll get to hear from many of them this evening. Grateful for our staff and grateful for Synod Council and deans who serve so graciously. And like I said, grateful for you, for your leadership in your congregation and all you do. Pastor Axel, why don't you begin us with devotions? Thank you.
I would be happy to. This is a time of fear that we're in. I mean, and it hasn't stopped. It started back in March of last year when we had no idea what was laying ahead of us, and it hasn't gotten a whole lot better. But perfect love casts out fear, and trusting that God is with us, that we are not alone. We go forward. And I've got a poem by John O'Donohue on courage that I want to read for you, but courage is not bravado in the absence of the need to fear, but it's the willingness to stand up in the fear and trust that God walks with us. So relax and listen. When the light around you lessens and your thoughts darken until your body feels fear turn cold as a stone inside, when you find yourself bereft of any belief in yourself, and all you unknowingly leaned on has fallen. When one voice commands your whole heart and it is raven dark, steady yourself and see that it is your own thinking that darkens your world. Search and you will find a diamond thought of light. Know that you are not alone and that this darkness has purpose. Gradually, it will school your eyes to find the one gift your life requires, hidden within this night corner. Invoke the learning of every suffering you have suffered. Close your eyes, gather all the kindling about your heart to create one spark. That is all you need to nourish the flame that will cleanse the dark of its weight of festered fear. A new confidence will come alive to urge you toward higher ground, where your imagination will learn to engage difficulty as its most rewarding threshold. Know that God walks with you in all of your fear, comforts you, holds your hand, just helps make it a little bit better and able to get through. So just know that you're not alone. Blessings.
Thank you, Pastor Patty. Appreciate that so much. I wanted to start with just that word of you're not alone, but also just a word of great, great thanks. The last time we spoke was before Christmas and New Year's, so I hope that each of you were able to have some respite and an opportunity to celebrate that in all the ways that you were able, and even knowing that we were limited in doing that, I hope it was at least moments of grace for you and your family. These are strange, strange days, and they continue to be strange, don't they? My goodness, this is the 7th one of these conversations. And as of this month of January, the United States has now hit the year mark of COVID-19. Much like you, I imagine, in fact, I can certainly say this, I am zoomed out, and here we are in Zoom again. It's sometimes Zoom-tastic and Zoom-filled Zoom-landia for me each day and all day. And yet I'm grateful that technology allows us to even do it in this way. I wanted to say to each of you that none of us have had to ever do this, and we're learning as we go. And we're also weary of being weary and tired of being tired. For you who are here, who are congregational members, I want to implore you, if you haven't done this, to do this, but please make sure you take time to thank your pastors and your deacons, your cantors and your musicians, your parish administrators and your janitors, your youth directors and children's educators, those who tend to the elderly, and those who make sure ministry happens in and out for media purposes, week in and week out. It takes a lot of extra effort and a lot of extra work to make sure that we continue to offer gospel-centered ministry in this synod and in this church and in your particular congregations. And I am so proud of each of our congregations and their leaders, their pastors, their deacons, and all those that I named who have been leading in this time. But yet I also see a lot of weariness on their faces and yours. So please make sure to take time to check in with those folks and make sure they're doing okay. One of the things we're doing as a synod is offering respite to our pastors and deacons, and we're going to be working on more of those opportunities over the next 6 months. And as a way of doing that, I've asked Pastor Pauline Farrington to help with some pastoral care around that and offering some resources, either through a weekend of getting away at one of our Lutheran camps, spiritual direction, coaching, or just a weekend off. Our synod staff have continued to offer sermons each and every week to give your congregation's leaders a break, but also to give your pastors a break. We'll continue to do that as long as we're in this pandemic and the way we are. So stay tuned for those. And the link to that is on our website, and it's posted each and every week. There's a different voice that preaches every week. I'll be doing something for Ash Wednesday as a sermon for those who would like to use that. And we also will be doing some special things during Holy Week, so stay tuned for that. Our synod staff have agreed to come together and create a worship service, the entire liturgy, for the Sunday after Easter. And so the entire liturgy for the Sunday after Easter will be created by our synod staff, sermon, prayers, everything included, packaged for you to use to give your musicians, deacons, pastors, secretaries, everybody a break after the long Lenten season and Easter weekend. So I hope you'll take us up on that offer. If you're in need of care, dear ones, both leaders and pastors and deacons, please be in touch with me or one of our assistants, as we want to make sure we're here for you in all the ways that we would love to be. But lastly, just thank you for all you're doing. We see you and we know you, and we are so grateful for you. I want to call on Pastor Jill Henning, who will lead us in a time of hearing from our COVID team. And you all, I'm sure, will have questions as they speak. We're going to make sure we offer plenty of time for questions, and we're going to do something a little different tonight. If you have those questions specifically that you'd like to ask so they don't get lost, if you want to shoot those to me through the chat box, I'm happy to take them there. and we will try to ask those as we go. But we also want to make sure you hear from a few of our other ministries as well. So Pastor Henning, go ahead. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bishop. I'm really grateful for these fine people that serve on our COVID-19 working group. Just last week, we got new federal guidelines. I sent them out to them. They were only 200 pages long. And before Friday was even done, they had already started to look at those and to look at how that was going to affect congregations. So they really are taking this responsibility seriously, and appreciate all the work that they do to keep us informed and to help go through all of the science that's going on. If you're like me, sometimes you just don't understand it all. So it's helpful to have these fine folks that are a part of it. And so we're appreciative of Imran and Pastor Tom Clark and Pastor Jonathan Trapp. But tonight we are going to hear from our newest member. She's a doctor in Athens, Georgia. And Dr. Terry, I'm going to get her last name wrong and I apologize, but she's on the screen as Doc Gecko. So that's a lot easier than Dr. Terry Kangulia. Did I get it close? Nope, not even close. Okay, well, we'll work on it and I'll get it better for the next one. But we're really glad to have Dr. Terry on the team, and she's going to talk a little bit about vaccines and what that means for us as we move forward, especially as they start to roll out. So Dr. Terry, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Pastor Henning. Give me a moment here just to get the right screen to share. And hang on. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
It looks good.
Okay, all right. So I've been tasked with talking to you about COVID-19 in the US and the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. One thing I've noticed over the course of this past year is that people forget that this is a disease that's caused by SARS-CoV-2, and it's a spectrum of symptoms and problems that have put a lot of us in the hospital. But in any case, I'm going to start with just talking about some statistics here. And currently, when you look at the number of cases we've had since November, from January to this past November, we've had 11 million cases. Since November alone to now, we've had an additional 14 million cases. What is really bothersome to me is the fact that when you look at the 2 million plus cases worldwide, as far as mortality is concerned, 20% of them are here in the US. And we're expected by probably end of February, early March to hit 500,000. But here's the kicker. The US comprises only 4.5% of the world population. Let that sink in for a second. So in terms of looking at the number of cases over the course of this past year and also the mortality, they kind of mirror each other. And this is actually coming straight from the National Strategy for COVID-19 that was released last week. We are currently in the third wave. As you can see, the upward slope has now lasted a lot longer compared to the first upward slope that we had at the beginning and middle of the year. If there are those of you that are tracking numbers over the past couple of weeks, you've probably noticed that the number of cases per week is starting to drop off a little bit, but just hold on because that may change. In terms of the game changer, the variant that we've identified from the UK, the B116 mutation that has a more contagious quality to it, may reverse this trend that we are seeing as far as the number of positives per week. So let's put this mortality rate into a little bit more perspective in terms of just what we typically see in the course of a normal year. 2019, we averaged about 8,000 deaths a day. Most of those are from cancer and cardiovascular disease. In this month alone, we've had several days where we've exceeded 4,000 fatalities a day. That's really not good. Most cases of COVID-19, yes, they are mild, but about 10 to 15% of these cases that we see do have moderate severity, and 5% of them are actually quite severe. There are a number of at-risk groups that have been identified, and part of this is reflective of demographics, which also reflects the presence of comorbid factors because of socioeconomic factors. The biggest ones are going to be related to things such as obesity, sickle cell disease, smoking, or type 2 diabetes. And we do see that African Americans, Asians, Hispanics are disproportionately affected. We see more severe disease and more mortality in terms of relative risk compared to the rest of the population in the US. So if you kind of try to put all of this into perspective, we've got first line defense, which is social distancing, masks, hand washing, avoiding high risk encounters, and quarantining when you really need to quarantine. So let's talk a little bit about the vaccine. It was rolled out in less than a year, thanks to the Operation Warp Speed. And to the credit of the Chinese, they had already sequenced this virus. And there's been also previous research from SARS-CoV-1 and from MERS that had already identified that the spike protein was going to be the target we needed to use for a couple of reasons. One, it's the most immunogenic, elicits a stronger response by your body. And two, it's the part that actually attaches to the cell when it's trying to get in. The previous fastest development of vaccine was for the mumps, and that took about 4 years. So it gives you a little bit more of an idea of how quickly this has happened. There are currently 2 vaccines that were approved by the FDA for emergency use, which is the Pfizer BioNTech and the Moderna vaccine. They are both mRNA vaccines, and they, after you receive the second shot, achieve efficacy as far as reducing your risk of developing disease as well as severe disease by 94% for Moderna and 95% with Pfizer. So what is exactly in this thing that you're getting put in your arm? The ingredients, if you will, basically are a mRNA coding sequence. The other portion of it is basically a shell that is composed of some fats and polyethylene glycol, and yeah, that's Miralax. There's a little bit of some salts like sodium and potassium, which is to allow for this to be balanced with the concentrations of these things inside a cell, and then sucrose, which is to basically stabilize the shape of the mRNA, which is really important when it gets frozen. So the things that are not in it that a lot of my patients have been asking me about, you know, can I do this because I've got an egg allergy, or is there a preservative in it? Is there latex in it? And the answer is no. When we look at the phase 3 trials that were conducted here in the US, it was heartening to see that there was a decent amount of diversity. There were Asians, African Americans, Latinx, and there were also a mix of people who had chronic conditions. The only group that was not in there, though, were pregnant patients. So what happens when you get this injection? Basically, once these nanoparticles with these little pieces of mRNA enter the muscle cells that are in your arm, the mRNA enters the cytoplasm outside of your nucleus, and it gets translated into a protein, which is then presented to the surface of the muscle cell. Some of it's also just floating away into the cytoplasm, into the serum, and it allows for your immune system to interact with it. Some of the cells that are also affected by this are going to be some of the white cells, and they present the protein in a slightly different way and bring these little fragments to your lymph nodes to elicit a response. So you end up developing a set of memory cells belonging to a couple different lines of your immune system that when you get your booster shot, either 3 or 4 weeks later, see this and respond to it in a stronger way. So as a consequence, people who get that second shot usually have a little bit more likelihood of having side effects from the injection site or just feeling more like you have the flu. So they are recommending that people who receive the second injection pre-medicate with something like Tylenol or ibuprofen. What is the result of getting this vaccine? So the big thing is that when you look at the immunity that is generated from the vaccine, it lasts a lot longer than that from if you actually got the virus. But we're doing it in such a way that you don't have to get expose yourself to the risk of getting the disease. We've seen that it not only reduces your risk of getting COVID-19 overall, but also your risk of developing severe disease. The thing that you need to recognize is that this is not 100% protection. When we say it's 94% effective or 95% effective, that translates into about 1 in 20 who receive the vaccine, finish the series, they get exposed to the virus, and that 1 in 20 can still get sick from it. So this is not a magic bullet. What they do not do to you, they don't give you COVID. It does not enter your DNA, and it does not cause infertility. With the population that I deal with, because I'm a obstetrician gynecologist, yes, I get that question a lot. As far as the stance from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, we have put a statement out that says that if a pregnant woman wants to get the COVID vaccine, they can. Interestingly, we haven't seen anybody who's gotten Guillain-Barré from this vaccine. There have been some weird things, but not that. The vaccine is not meant for use as prophylaxis if you've been inadvertently exposed, and it's just common sense because the incubation for the virus is 4 to 5 days. The earliest that you're going to see a measurable response from the vaccine takes about 2 weeks, excuse me. So here's my pretty picture. It's worth 1,000 words, and this comes from Moderna. Basically shows this lipid shell, nanoshell that has the mRNA sequence in it that gets injected into your muscle, and some of it gets exposed to some of the local T cells that are roaming in the area, as well as into the muscle cells directly. You get this translation, and then it gets expressed on the surface. And this just shows that it's done a little bit differently depending on what kind of cell you're talking about. As a consequence, then you've got B cells that match up their antibodies to be able to lock onto it, and train T cells to recognize it so that they know this is not supposed to be there. So why should we vaccinate? It is much preferable to have a minor reaction to the vaccine as opposed to developing potentially the disease from the virus, which, as I mentioned before, about 10 to 15% of people who get this virus will get moderate disease and 5% pretty severe. I've seen this over and over again. It takes several weeks to recover from this. Even with non-critically ill patients who get COVID-19, we're seeing long-term sequelae that involve the brain, the heart, the lungs, and there is still much we need to learn about this. So, as I mentioned before, the immunity that's generated from this lasts a lot longer. So when you look at people who have already had COVID, that antibody that they developed from their illness doesn't last a whole long time, maybe 3 to 5 months. What we're seeing is that this can last a year or maybe a little bit more. So as a consequence, they are recommending people who have already had COVID and have recovered, they're actually still candidates to receive the vaccine. Folks who have also received the antibody serum, they can receive it too, but they're recommending waiting 90 days. The other reason to vaccinate, in addition to protecting yourself, you want to protect others. There are groups that can't receive the vaccine. They may be too medically ill. They may be immunocompromised and in such a way that they just can't mount an adequate response if they were to get the vaccine. There are a number of groups that are at increased risk for severe illness if they get exposed to SARS-CoV-2, which, as we've all learned over this past year, include older adults, folks who have chronic medical conditions like kidney disease, COPD, heart conditions, folks who have had solid organ transplants, HIV, sickle cell disease, obesity, etc. And as I mentioned before, ethnic groups, which we think is partly because of their socioeconomic mix relative to the rest of the population. Pregnant women are also more at risk for having complications if they get SARS-CoV-2 as well. And I did it again. So on the horizon, we are currently in the US going through a phase 3 trial with the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is different. This is a double-stranded Adenovector vaccine, which basically, long story short, means that they put the coding for the protein in DNA form inside a cold virus. This cold virus enters and gets inside the cell. This double-stranded DNA actually gets incorporated into the genome, the DNA of these cells where it's locally injected, and then it gets expressed like the mRNA vaccine. We don't have an idea of when this is going to be granted the emergency utilization authorization by the FDA. They're saying maybe end of the first quarter, but we're not sure. Johnson & Johnson is also developing a similar type of vaccine that would be given as a single shot. Again, I have no idea when this is going to come out. There are other types of vaccines that work a little bit differently that are in the pipeline, but again, I have no idea. There's probably 240 vaccines in development, and 40 of which are in clinical trials around the world, but we just have to use what we have at our disposal at this point. So bottom line, when this vaccine that we have currently, Moderna and Pfizer, become available to you, we've got the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that has created these groups of priority. Once you get past all of that and can get the vaccine, please get it. Remember, this is only a tool, and it serves actually more as a second line of defense as opposed to everything that we've been using thus far. One thing I've seen a lot of, and it's been frustrating, is that folks in my congregation who are older, not as savvy as far as having a comfort with using a cell phone and texting and just using links to go to websites to monitor your response to vaccine, or just to get registered for a vaccine. They need more help. So check on them and make sure that they have been successful as far as getting registered to get vaccinated. I would encourage you, when you do get your vaccine, participate in the CDC V-Safe program, which is to help them gather information on people's responses to the vaccine. Just more information is always helpful. And be involved in that. They will track if you are having an adverse reaction and contact you. So that is the conclusion of my little talk. Sorry if it ran a little long.
All right, thank you, Dr. Terry, for all that information. It's a lot to go through, but I think the main thing to take from that is that if you're able to get the vaccine, and that, you know, if you have questions, talk with your individual doctor. But we are also glad, for those of you that have been on our webinars before, Dr. Erica Bornstead is an epidemiologist, and she's going to share a little more about what this means as we get the vaccine and living that into our daily lives. So Dr. Bornstead, welcome you tonight.
Thank you, Pastor Jill and Terry, for setting me up for this talk here. Just a disclaimer, I am not an infectious disease doctor. I am a pediatrician, but also an epidemiologist. And this really is just to spread education about the vaccine. As Bishop said and Terry said, it is a hard thing to talk about COVID and hear the data. So please, when you need the time, take the time for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones. This has been hard. This has been incredibly hard. It's going to continue to be hard until we get it under control. The update I gave in December, I said maybe by February we would reach 400,000 deaths. We reached that on January 19th. That means COVID-19 has killed more American lives than both World War II and World War I combined. We are on track that by the end of March, we will have more deaths from COVID than any other American event, including the 1918 flu. So, but it's not all downers. We're talking here about hope. We have hope with the vaccine coming, okay? When you get the chance, get that vaccine. And it's for a number of reasons. I want to tell a story here about a disease that attacked an unsuspecting population. This disease had no symptoms in 95% of people that it attacked. It attacked adults more than it attacked children, but it left thousands with debilitating disease and lifelong disabilities. Sounds a lot like COVID, right? It was polio. How many of you know someone who's been infected with polio? If you could raise your hand. I actually do not. Right? How many have known anyone who has died from polio? All right. How many know someone who has been infected with COVID? Raise of hands. How many know someone who has died from COVID? So I draw this analogy. Polio was at the center of everyone's fears in the 40s and 50s, but then a vaccine came. And it wasn't right away. They still practiced their isolation, but the vaccine started to get things under control. And we have not seen a case of polio in the United States since 1979. And that is because of effective vaccination campaigns and education. And so I just wanted to bring that history lesson on top of our medical education. And so what about some real world data with the COVID vaccine? As of now, 9 million people have been vaccinated with COVID with the vaccine in the US. There have been 29 severe anaphylactic reactions, severe allergic reactions, and there have been no deaths. There were 2 CDC reports. Pfizer's report was early on in December. They looked at 2 million doses that were given and they had 21 reactions. All occur within the first 24 hours. 70% are occurring within the first 15 minutes. And same was seen with Moderna from December 21st to January 10th. All the reactions are occurring within the first 24 hours. There is some reports in the news in Norway that there were some elderly deaths a few weeks after getting the COVID vaccine. And they said, Are they related? Well, both WHO and Norway's equivalent of the CDC have investigated it and have both released statements saying that they do not believe these deaths were related to the vaccine at all. The difficult thing with news media is they can say, someone got a vaccine and then a bad thing happened. That does not mean, even though they're associated, that they are causal. You all are here listening to my talk. If someone from this group goes out and gets in a car accident today, did I cause it? I sure hope not. But it's an association. Just because you're here doesn't mean it caused it. And that's the same thing with the vaccine and why you need to wait for the scientific data to come out. 2 news stories coming out recently is about Hank Aaron's, who has passed away, and Dr. Gregory Michael, a physician in Florida. Both passed away about 2 weeks or so after receiving their COVID vaccine. Both are under investigations. I'm not going to lie to you. I do not know. They are both being investigated, whether or not they're related to the vaccine. I have not seen definitive answers about that. I don't suspect it, but I don't know, okay? This is, I think, the only graph I'm going to show you tonight. And this on the left is percentages. This COVID hospitalization, so among 25 million people infected, this is a very rough number because there's not great data about how many infected have been hospitalized, but it's about 3 to 3.5% of those infected are hospitalized. Of the 25 million who have been infected, 400,000 have died, about 1.6%. So of those 9 million people vaccinated, 29 have had severe allergic reactions. Your eyes aren't deceiving you. There is no bar here because the percentage of 29 per 9 million is 0.0003%, and 0 have died. So when I get the vaccine, can life go back to normal? Some of you may have seen, I put in the chat, I've received both of my vaccines. I am changing nothing, you hear me, nothing about what I am doing at home. Because as Dr. Terry said, this is just one of the tools to help us change the curve. We still need to wear masks. We still need to stay 6 feet apart. We still need to stay home when we can. And this has come out in the most recent executive orders that masks are now required on all federal property. Our president has challenged us with a 100-day mask challenge. I encourage you to bring that back to your congregation to encourage them to wear masks when they are out as well. Because every single hospital in the US is stretched thin. As you all know, I'm a pediatrician. Every pediatric colleague I talk with has been caring for adult patients in their hospital. What does that mean? That means that adult hospitals are so full that they're sending 25 and 30-year-olds to the pediatric hospital because they don't have room and they still need intensive care. So I want to talk a little bit about indicators because that's where we talk about our public health, when we look at the broad picture and what's going on, and vaccine being one of our tools to change the indicators. There continues to be discussion about whether or not I should look at my county level data or my state level data. I would just urge you strongly to look at your state level data for a number of reasons. One, all testing centers are required to report it to the state, okay? Not all counties have a health department. In the state of Alabama, there's only, I think, 4 county level health departments. So your state health department is kind of the go-to for everybody. Also, state level data allows you to see more data, which therefore allows you to visualize trends better. So if there's anything in epidemiology we love is more data. County level data is really small, and so you can miss trends. If in a county you go from 1 positive case to 2 positive cases, is that a big deal? I think it depends. If you are in rural coastal Alabama, I don't know, that might be a big deal. If you're in Jefferson County where Birmingham is located, going from 101 cases to 102 cases is probably not a big deal. And so state level data allows for a bigger picture of the trend of what's going on. And it captures all of the population together. I don't know a single church out there, and you all could correct me, that is isolated to a county. We have members at our church that live in 5 different counties. They work in 15 counties, and they travel and visit families in other counties. And so, no, we're not isolated fully to Alabama, but 99% of the time, the people coming to our church are from Alabama, but they're not all from the same county. It does make it, when you look at the state level data, it makes it harder to see your local relevance. But at some point, we've got to draw the line. Are you going to start looking at your zip code? Are you going to start looking at your square block where your church is? Or at some point, and I think state level is where the line is drawn. We used to look at the country level data, right? When this first rolled out, we compared the US to Italy to China. But we found that looking at state level data is probably as small as we want to go. And county level, the only benefit I could see is that it seems more relevant, but in the big picture, it's not. There's a lot more negatives, I think, with looking at county level data, and you can miss a lot. And the biggest question I've had when I've looked at all of our state health department websites a lot, it's not clear if someone doesn't list what county they're from, where they get put. Or if they get tested in one county but live in another, does it just get filled in, or it's unclear? It might be done right, but it might not, and it's just been unclear. When you focus on the state level data, that discrepancy goes away. So how do our states look right now? I showed almost the exact same slide a month ago. Not a whole lot has changed other than our January curve is higher. Maybe in Alabama and Tennessee, we're seeing a downward trend in cases, but there continues to be backlogs. Just a couple days ago, Alabama reported a backlog of cases over the Martin Luther King weekend holiday of 500 positive cases that got plopped in. So we're not quite sure where this is going yet. What about the other indicators? Test positivity, disease burden, ICU capacity. We're all really doing bad. Like, it's just, the disease burden is high, the test positivity is high, our ICUs are filled to the brim, and the vaccinations are starting, but they're nowhere near where they need to be yet. And this is just a reminder of some key indicators we've talked about a number of times on these talks, so I'll just put them up here again. And I believe a bishop is getting a document that includes these indicators. And what do you do when the vaccines start to roll out? Because that has been a question that's starting to come around with our congregation. Once people start to get vaccinated at our congregation.
Put it in the chat.
What's that? Okay. Once vaccines start to come out, do these indicators change? And I would argue right now, there is no data to suggest we change the indicators. Instead, the vaccine is another tool. Just like Terry posted up there with our tools that we have, social distancing, masking, washing our hands, isolating at home, add a vaccine there, and that's one of our tools, but we're still looking for our disease burden to be low, our cases to be declining, our test positivity to be less than 5%, and that our hospitals aren't overfull. Then we can start to move forward. Maybe you could argue, and we're in discussions in our congregation, that maybe small groups could start to meet who have been vaccinated. Perhaps your roster of leaders can start to make individual visits to folks they know who have been vaccinated, who live by themselves, who've really been struggling. I would just caution you, and I'd leave this to you and your congregations to discuss, are you going to vaccine card check everybody who comes through the door? What happens if they say they left it at home? Are you going to turn them away? So just keep those considerations in mind when you're talking about altering things because of vaccines. And as Dr. Terry mentioned, there are new strains coming. We don't know what's going to happen. I have heard a quote. This graph here is the South Africa curve. The United States curve is this darker one. They use terrible colors to distinguish them. This one here is the United States, and then this pink one here is the United Kingdom. This is the United Kingdom with the new strain active throughout the entire country. The US still does not have the new strain active throughout the entire country, but it's coming. It is here in the US. It's in at least 10 states that I have seen. And so the fear is that it is more contagious. We don't know if it causes more severe disease or not, but it definitely is more contagious. So our curve in a couple months could be a lot worse. There also was a report I stumbled upon today that Ohio has identified 2 new strains in Ohio compared to also the US or the UK and the South African strain. We don't yet know what this means. I want to just quickly go over some other common myths I've heard and common questions that I've seen, because I think there are some important hesitations that I want to make sure everyone has heard rationales behind them. One was the concern that the vaccine has been rushed. Well, it is true that this is the fastest vaccine ever developed, but it's been rushed because red tape was cut out, money was poured in, which usually takes years. This is from the BBC, and this is a timeline, year 0 to year 10, of what typically happens for a vaccine. And it's been squished into 1 year. They predicted 2 years when they published this, but it's been squished into 1 year. All of the same steps have occurred. They've just done it faster, okay? Some other common questions, I think I'll skip over the ones that Terry addressed about DNA. Other thing I have heard frequently is about infertility. It does not cause infertility. It does not cause miscarriages. Does not contain fetal tissue. I have heard that question as well. Heard the question about microchips and nanotechnology. So nanotechnology is one of those fancy medical words that just means the study of super small things. Yes, the mRNA vaccines are the study of super small things, nanotechnology. There is no microchip in it. I think we're talking maybe in 3020 that would be possible, but there is no microchip in it, okay? There is a false video out there of Bill Gates where this rumor got started, where a lot of video compilations were put together. It is not true. We covered that one, and we've covered that. So get a vaccine, keep wearing your mask, keep staying home. But
thank you, Dr.
Be able to stick around
Erica.
a little bit at the end, but I do have another meeting to get to as well, but I'll stick around as long as I can to answer questions.
Thank you. We did have one question about how they identify new strands. So before you have to, since I know you have to run away, not run away, but you'll be leaving us. Can you tell us how they discover those new strands just briefly?
That goes beyond my medical knowledge. Super smart doctors take the virus, they take blood from people infected, and then they do fancy PCR tests to say this strain, like they look at the full genetic material. They use that nanotechnology. And Terry, please jump in if you know more than I do, but they run fancy tests to say this strain matches this, and this strain matches this. I'm sorry, it's beyond me.
Nope, that's, I think what I heard was that they actually do like genetic, markers to figure it out. Dr. Terry?
Just real quickly, the technology that we use to be able to sequence these things and realize that they're not huge things relative to the human genome. It's a lot more efficient, it's a lot faster. So that's why they're able to sequence these things and compare them side by side to see where there are differences. But it's a function of how the technology has evolved over the last 20 years.
Great, thank you. Well, we're also really glad to have on our team, Pastor Taylor Edwards, Burton Edwards, who has been serving on an ecumenical task force to help develop procedures for congregations, specifically as we move into different seasons of the church. And so we barely got through Christmas, and already I was sending Pastor Taylor emails saying, well, what are we going to do about Ash Wednesday? So we're really grateful that he has been working to help come up with some guidelines. So Pastor Taylor, if you want to take over and you are muted, Pastor Taylor. There we go.
Thank you. Go ahead, go to the next slide if you would. This is a reminder of what it is that, who we are as an ecumenical gathering of worship scholars and pastors and theologians and experts in infectious diseases and epidemiology and CDC staff who are developing guidance for churches about how they can resume worship in person where that's possible based on the guidelines that are out there. Guidance that's bringing all these scholars together in dialogue with each other on an ongoing basis, and that is theologically, liturgically, practically, and medically as rich and helpful as possible. Go to the next one. So the first thing we want to say is, and we came to this decision quickly and universally, and it was kind of recommended, starting with some of our medical staff in our consultation. We're recommending no indoor gatherings for either Shrove Tuesday or Ash Wednesday, no matter what. Wherever you are in the country, do not meet indoors. Largely because even if we do start seeing a significant downturn in cases between now and February 17th, we're still looking at a total number of new cases per day that's probably considerably higher than the peak in July, when we should not have been meeting anyway. Plus, as we've just been mentioning, last week, the CDC noted that the rise of several new mutations likely means an increase in the number of transmissions that'll take place with each person getting sick. And so we want to be extra cautious. So for that reason, we have these three criteria. And if your congregation or the people that are part of your congregation meet any of these, or if your county or your region where people are meet any one of these, we're recommending that you not meet at all. No gatherings in person for Ash Wednesday. So if your positivity rate, that is more than 10% of people who are tested, are testing positive, do not meet at all. If you're looking at the COVID-19 risk assessment on the Georgia Tech website, and your number exceeds 40% in your county or the counties where your people are from, do not meet at all. Or if your ICU beds are filled to greater than 80% of capacity, do not meet at all. If any one of those is there, do not meet at all. Those are our recommendations, and CDC supported us in that. Also, all of our recommendations assume these things: that you're wearing a mask, fully covering your mouth and your nose at all times, maintaining that 6-foot distance at all times. You don't have any symptoms of COVID, and you've not been knowingly exposed to anyone who's had COVID or symptoms of COVID within the last 2 weeks. So we go on to the next. So here's our specific guidance then. If you're able to meet in person, the first thing to do is to remember, what is it that matters about the Ash Wednesday service? And this is really kind of from the liturgical theological side. What are the things that need to happen in a service for Ash Wednesday? We need to call the congregation to personal and corporate repentance. We need to face our mortality. We need to begin any final intensive preparation for baptism if we have catechumens who are working through that process. And we need to call the baptized to take up spiritual disciplines as a means of reaffirming their baptismal commitments. Those are the core purposes for the launch day of the season of Lent. And all 4 of those can be done at home. You don't have to gather to do any of those. So if you're gathering in purpose, we say, first of all, keep the service short, less than 30 minutes. Remember that ashes are optional, and that's true across the board. There are no Ash Wednesday rites that absolutely require the use of ashes, even though it's called Ash Wednesday. And also, you don't have to use special ashes. You can use any ashes that you have. We don't recommend that you go out to your barbecue grill and use ash from that, because you're likely going to burn yourself with that kind of ash because it'll have some caustic stuff in it. But you don't have to use special ashes. If your church wants to distribute ashes for home use, we recommend that you do that outdoors, and that you do that over a long enough period of time that you're not causing any traffic issues, as it's especially important in larger cities, in places that don't have a lot of parking or access to cars. And then if somebody else is imposing the ashes, we recommend that they follow the Roman Catholic guidance from the Vatican, which we link in our guidance document that you'll receive, And that is place it on top of the head without saying anything to anybody, not placing it at the forehead, which is in such proximity to the mouth and the nose. Next. That's it.
Thank you, Pastor Taylor. And I know that your group is working on recommendations for Holy Week and Easter, so those will be coming out. All of those can be found on the COVID website, on the Synod's website. So if you go to the Southeastern Synod's website, you can see when we get new recommendations, those are linked there. We also posted on there the ELCA, or sorry, the US government's guidelines that just came out on Friday. So if you want to read all 200 pages, you can check that out and see what they're recommending as well, and where we get the 100-day mask challenge. Because of the new variant, they are recommending that if you are inside a building, to double mask. So I see Pastor Erica making a face, so maybe she wants to speak.
You pastored me again. I am not a pastor.
Sorry, Dr. Erica.
Too much above my level, but I forgot you had asked me to speak about the double mask. In general, more layers in your mask is better. Initially, we thought the mask was only protective against protecting other people, but there has been new data that suggests wearing any type of cloth masks does give you a little bit of protection. It's not the same as wearing an N95, so don't get me wrong, because you wear a mask, that doesn't give you liberty to go out and do whatever you want. But to keep you safe when you're out wearing a mask, it does provide you some protection. The more layers you have, so double masking, triple masking, will provide you with more protection. Basically, these particles are super, super tiny. And even though you have a piece of cloth, there's little holes in there. Any sewer on here could tell you there are holes in cloth. The more you crisscross that and add more layers there, then the more that it's harder for the particles to get through. So double masking is better. Triple masking is even better. If you can get surgical masks, that's better. Putting filters in them, all of that is true.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Erica, and I won't send you to seminary to make you a pastor. I apologize for that. There was a question about the phases for when you can receive a vaccine, specifically about teachers. Every state is responsible for their own phasing. So you're going to need to check your state to see when you can come up for a vaccine. And so I think the bishop put in the chat box the links to the various states. But if you just do COVID vaccine in your state, the link will come up and you can see when you are eligible to get in line for that. And then again, keep watching where the vaccines are being released, because every day a new distribution is coming out. We just have a local grocery store that's going to be starting to do vaccines by appointment. So as they're getting quantities in new ways, they're going to release those. So check that out. But just keep on the Synod's website for any updates that we have. We will send them out there first. And as we get updates, I also send them to your disaster coordinators for your congregation. So if you don't have a disaster coordinator, I'd love to talk to you about why your congregation should have one. So reach out to me through the Synod's website, and I'll be happy to get them on the list. And Bishop, I believe that's the end of our COVID report.
Thank you.
Pastor, could I sorry, just add one thing about the vaccines. We have started hearing rumors, and they have come true, that even if you don't meet your state's criteria, if you go to locations where they're giving vaccine and sign up to be on their wait list, even though you're not in phase 1A or B, they're calling people at the end of the day, because once that vial is open, all the vaccines must be used, and they don't want it to waste them. So I have had friends who are 60 in no essential care groups, and they've been able to get vaccinated. That's true for Alabama. I've heard it similar for other states. I don't know about your specific state, but reaching out to where they're giving them, seeing if there's wait lists. I apologize for interrupting that, but I wanted to help spread that word.
Thank you. Thanks to our COVID team. We are at an hour, and we advertise this until 8:15, so we have just a few more minutes. I want to do a couple of little quick ministry commercials and leave some time if anyone has questions. But very quickly, Pastor Boda.
And now for something completely different, a stewardship update. First, I want to give a huge thank you to all the congregations who have already provided 2021 mission support intents. We have 74 congregations who have submitted one. We would love to get 75% of our congregations, or 118. So still time. Pastor Michael's going to put the link in for putting that support or mission support intent in. Second, as you know, our Synod has had some challenges this past year in meeting the financial commitments that we have. Our giving has been way down in 2020, as many of your congregations. We know that God will always be abundant and God will always be with us. So we put forth an abundance appeal. And I want you to know that we have received intents of over $100,000 toward our $225,000 deficit. So huge shout out to all of you. Many of you as individuals have made an intent, as well as we have 14 congregations who have given over and above. And Pastor Michael is putting a list of those in the chat room now. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that. And finally, we have 3 opportunities for you. First, this Friday, free from 10 till 3, Pastor Mike Ward will be doing a stewardship symposium. He's fabulous if you haven't had an opportunity to hear him and to learn from him. So sign up on our Synod website. Second, on February 22nd and 25th, we will host Steve Osleger of the ELCA, and he's going to provide an introduction to a congregational financial assessment tool. This will allow you to assess your practices in your congregation in the areas of accounting, finance, human resource, risk management, and stewardship to figure out how well you're doing or whether your practices are non-existent. And at that point, you will then receive resources as well as a community to help you. As most of us know, when we give to congregations, when we give to organizations, we want to make sure that our gifts are well managed and well stewarded, and this is a way for you to do that. Third, if your congregation is ready for a year-long deep dive into stewardship, we're going to be offering Stewardship for All Seasons, which is a year-long program with Pastor Mike Ward again. If that is something you're ready to do, please let us know. We're forming a cohort. There will be some funding available for that through our Lilly Lifeline funds, as well as our Soli grant. And then finally, we know that God, no matter this pandemic, God is abundant and God is good. And there are stories out there that all of you have. So please share your stories with us so that we may share them with the entire Synod. And most of all, just thank you for all that you have done, all that you do, your prayers for the Synod, and your ongoing support.
Thank you, Pastor Karen. Pastor Patty, very quick 30-second commercial on evangelism.
Okay. We want to hear your stories about evangelism this Thursday night from 7 to 8:15 or Sunday afternoon from 3 to 4:15. Hook down to Zoom with us and talk about evangelism. It's nothing fancy. We just want to hear whether that makes you sick or whether that makes you excited. The next thing is we're going to have roll out our Unbinding Your Heart on Ash Wednesday. If your church wants to engage in a small group Bible study with 40 days of prayer, call me and I'll hook you up and get you connected. There you go.
Thank you so much. Melissa Fuller Sims, would you like to invite folks to the movie that Diversity and Justice is hosting, please?
Absolutely. So on February the 21st at 3 p.m., we'll be hosting a viewing of the movie Selma, followed by a Q&A session. We encourage all of you to register, go out to the Facebook account or to our website and you get all the details. We've also completed our vision statement. Please check out the website for all the information regarding that.
Thank you. As you know, this year we will not have an in-person Synod Assembly. It will be digital. It'll be June 5th. And more information will be coming to you in the next few months, but stay tuned to that. And we will be posting in the next few e-newses the positions we're looking for that need to be elected at the Synod Assembly. So we will do a one-day assembly. Workshops will be offered the night before and will be via Zoom. The cost obviously is going to be way less than being in person, but there is a cost associated with it in order to pay for the technology needed to do this. So we'll be giving you more information as we get closer. I wanted to invite you with Pastor Matt Steinauer and I'm encouraging you all to walk with me for 40 days during Lent, over 40 miles, and give $40. So if you if you're a walker, walk with me. If you're a runner, you can run. I will not be running. And if you want to do 80 miles, do 80 miles. And if you're not able to physically walk or run, but you are able to give, we encourage you to give at least $40 and encourage your congregations to join me with this. I'll be posting pictures of how it's going and some scripture text along the walk. And we, every dime will go to ELCA World Hunger to benefit our Daily Bread grants. The other thing I wanted to point out is our youth events will be going digital in all Georgia. It is time to sign up for that. And that will be a day-long digital event coming your way for our youth. I wanted to stop now and see what questions anyone may have. So if you have a question, if you would put your name in the chat box and I'll call on you, or raise your hand. Or you could type your question in the chat box about anything that we've posted. I know that was a lot of information. You will get all those slides, by the way. And anything we pointed to, we're going to be sending all that in the follow-up email. Any questions? Pastor Jill, do you see anybody raising their hand or shaking their fist or anything? Beverly says, my question was, what is our current daily death toll?
That came from Dr. Terry's presentation. There was a question about that in her slide, she had the average death rate was $8,000 people per day, and that 4,000 additional per day were COVID. Is it easy to assume, Dr. Terry, that we're looking at around 12,000 people a day are dying with natural causes or whatever causes, and then adding in COVID? You're muted.
Yes.
There you go. Okay. So yeah, so the daily death toll then would be around 12,000 people per day.
If it's possible, I can share a quick slide. I tried pulling up that number on the CDC website. This is Erica. Sorry, I turned my video off before. I've got a couple minutes. This figure here is from the CDC website. It's a lot of data there, but what it is showing is this dark blue is our kind of baseline all-cause mortality, excluding COVID-19. Now, this is as of early September, okay? So the current surge is not in here, but you can see the all-cause mortality hovers, and this is weekly, not daily, hovers at around that 60,000, so about that 8,000 number. COVID on that first surge is here in this upward purple. This is the extra deaths, okay? This was the second surge. And as Dr. Terry is mentioning, it's suggested that this next one, which probably in the next few weeks, CDC will come out with a new updated kind of all-cause mortality assessment, that we're going to have an excess of 4,000 a day on top of that 8,000. But this is from the CDC. It was what I could quickly pull up while we were talking.
Thank you, Dr. Bornstead, and that was really helpful. Beverly shared that.
Are there other questions about anything that we've shared with you all tonight? The other thing I would say is, if you have pearls of wisdom in how you're managing this virus, we would love to hear your pearls of wisdom and how it relates to how you've been caring for your people, worshiping with one another. So if you would send those stories to either myself or Pastor Henning, we'd love to be able to share those pearls with other people in our synod. The last announcement I had is our next one of these will be February the 22nd at 7 p.m. And I'm looking around the screen. It's hard for me to see everybody. Pastor Michael, Pastor Henning, anybody you see? If not, I'm going to call on Pastor Jeanette to lead us in a closing prayer. I give thanks for each of you and all you do for so many. God bless you. Pastor Michael, if you would close us with a prayer.
Sure thing. Let us pray. We give thanks to you, Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously protected us today. We ask you to forgive us all our sins, where we have done wrong, and graciously to protect us tonight. To your hands we commend ourselves, our bodies, our souls, and all that is ours. Let your holy angels be with us, so that the wicked foe may have no power over us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. God bless you. We'll send you a follow-up email in the next day or so. Take care.